just be used for internal purposes, may be shared on the DARPL website as well, and on our company YouTube channel. So if there is anything that you'd like to be taken out of and you wouldn't like to be included in this recording, please do let us know. That's absolutely fine. But first things first, welcome to this session, session 1 of the Anti-Racism Professional Learning Series as part of the DARPL project. Thank you so much for joining. It's great that you're involved in this, really important given the recent launch of the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan by the government, and kind of our duty in general anyway. So the kind of topic and title of this session is Introduction to Intersectionality. We'll go into some obviously key core terms as well to do with racism, inequality, and anti-racism in general, but kind of the focus of this session will be on that key term, intersectionality. So really quickly, I'll just briefly introduce you to myself. So I've got a bit of a political academic background, so politics and sociology is my degree. I also work as a policy and public affairs officer for a third sector organisation in Wales as well. I have background as a learning support worker, and I worked with various children with different additional learning needs. And also through I'm representing IECC, I'm the Education Policy and Curriculum Consultant and the Company Director. So I'll just quickly pass you to the founding director, Soraya, who will introduce you to herself and a bit more about who we are as an organisation. Oh, sorry, I think you're muted, Soraya.
Sorry. You. Hi, thank you. I'm Soraya Caudle, and as Izzy has highlighted, I'm the founding director of I'm Representing IECC. So my background is in youth and community work for the last 20 years. I'm a mother of 2, and I specialise in education policy and curriculum consultancy. And I'm just glad to have you all here and take part in this journey with us. So thank you. Also, just to give you a bit of background about who we are and what we do, I'm Representing IECC was founded on lived experience of institutional racism and identifying the gaps in mainstream service provision when working towards eradicating institutional racism, especially in education. So within our services, our strap line is we are taking tick box exercises off the agenda. So we really value the work that we do, and we want to ensure that those that participate in any of our learning, that they also share that notion with us. We provide a lot of services that are very bespoke and sustainable services that meet those needs of the various institutions. So we provide curriculum and policy consultancy services. We also deliver anti-racist professional learning and development programs. We also provide inclusive learning resources, and we also provide events management. And that in whole is the services that we provide. So if you are interested in finding out more about what we do or getting involved in the work that we provide, our contact details will be at the end of the slide of the presentation. So our details are there. Okay. So housekeeping, just to go through a few of those details. As Isabella has mentioned, this session is being recorded, so if there are any issues, please do let us know. We are going to be conducting some open, discussion. So all that we ask is that we just be mindful of people's opinions and views, and we respect that. In respect of technical considerations, if we could just mute ourselves, please. If anyone does have any questions or any issues, we do have the chat there. So, please get involved in that. But you can also raise your hand as well. So just be mindful to use that and not interrupt one another. And then as far as our values and principles, like I said, we are taking tick box exercises off the agenda. We are very much about being proactive when it comes to anti-racism. And it is all about being proactive with our approach. So not just to come to these sessions and go away. It's about giving you that information for you to think about things and to develop on your learning, and anti-racism as a foundation to learning. So we don't just prescribe to terms such as BAME. We usually use language or terms such as global majority or people of colour. And if you're interested to know more as to why we do that, you can get in contact with us directly, or you can visit our website for further information. I feel that I've covered everything, unless Izzy wants to interject there and just let us know that, yeah, I've covered it.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Soraya. Yeah, so hopefully that's given you kind of a bit of an overview of who we are, a bit of helpful background there. So kind of getting straight to it, I know as teachers or teachers in training, you're going to be very fixed on a purpose for the lesson today. So these taster session aims are to open up thought to the social definitions of racism and to identify what it means to use an intersectional lens for the practice of anti-racism. So kind of kicking it off, we think it's really important to deconstruct that term racism in order to understand anti-racism. And anti-racism is obviously this key background factor underpinning all of this training and all of this kind of journey towards an anti-racist Wales kind of projected for 2030. So before we delve into that concept of intersectionality, we think it's important to clarify the experience and concept of racism. We need to be really aware of the multifaceted presence of racism in order to create a culture that is opposed to it. So a bit of kind of technical background and a bit of statistics here. You may have seen a statistic like this kind of floating around. It is a UK-wide context, but it says 95% of young Black British people have witnessed racist language in education. Nearly half, 49%, feel that racism is the largest hurdle to academic attainment, and 50% say that teacher perceptions are the biggest barrier to educational success. These will all be in this reference in the slides, which you'll receive that. So if you do want to look at the sources of these, please have a look at the slides that you'll receive. So the context of the situation really is witnessing racism is a really common occurrence in the lives of children of colour. And then also thinking about the people on the other end of this racism as well. It's actually thinking about the culture of our schools at this present time, and that actually it's been regularly normalised to see this type of language in schools. And racism for some is quite an everyday reality. So you may have kind of seen quite technical terms for racism being kind of thrown about and being categorised. And there's many technical terms to categorise different types of racism. So you've got covert, overt racism, direct and indirect, institutional, systemic, contrasting to systematic. You may have heard some of these if you've attended the Show Racism the Red Card Corps anti-racism training, which often crop up there. But for us, we're concerned with the everyday reality. What does that look like? And when we encounter racism, we can't rely on our academic notes or our dictionary. Incidents vary really tremendously in nature and evoke a really visceral and emotive response. So we have to be able to draw on our instincts and initiative, which are shaped by both our knowledge and our lived experience. So racism at the end of the day is complex and it can often be disguised. So it's thinking about knowing these technical terms, but also having a real connection to the way that racism can feel. And although we don't have that relatability in all of us, if we impact it and increase our understanding through professional and learning and understanding lived experience, we can really help ourselves take a restorative approach in these situations. And racism at the end of the day is best defined by those who experience it. So asking people is really important. Trying to understand and put yourself in the shoes of others that experience that is the best way to understand the concept itself. It's not a one-dimensional issue. It's that's experienced identically by individuals, and it can come in many forms. So it's really, really complex. So just for reference, and we'll come back to this in more detail later, we find a case study is always really useful, always drawing this back to the everyday reality of the lived experience of people and what's actually occurred in our lifetime. And we know that this is really real for people, so bringing that back to that reality is really important. So here's a case study of a Welsh young boy. This was from a few years ago. So Lucas is mixed race, he has additional learning needs, and at the time attended a special school in Wales. When he was 9 years old, Lucas worked up the courage to tell his mum, Lisa, he was being bullied by other children at school. He told Lisa that the other children would call him the N-word. Lucas felt angry and upset because he knew what the word meant. When Lisa approached the school for support, she felt the school staff and community needed to take an active and restorative approach, and she felt deeply concerned and upset by the advice that Lucas was given, which said he needed to build resilience. Lucas needed mental health and wellbeing support, and Lucas was so hurt he attempted to take his own life, and this is a 9-year-old boy. So that is a real example of the deep and traumatic effect that racism in various forms can take on an individual, regardless of age. And it's really important to bear that in mind, that this ripple effect that it can have not only on the loved ones around you, but also things like mental health. So as I say, we'll revisit that in more detail later, but just kind of take that into consideration and have that in the back of your mind. So for us, self-reflection is always really important, and for sessions like this, we always say that we'd like you going away with maybe more questions that you had when you came in, because really that's at the bottom of all of this, is questioning your own practice, the people of your the people around you, your colleagues, your peers, your family, and how you can be doing more to understand these issues and be active in this journey to an anti-racist Wales. So a few questions to reflect on, maybe you want to write them down or just kind of note them in your mind at the minute. So the first one, am I being led by my own interpretation of racism or others? i.e., am I allowing bias to affect my approach? And the thing with unconscious biases, we always say, if it's unconscious, how do we challenge that? But the way that you challenge that is making sure that you've put the time and the work in to put those structures in place to be able to question what you already think, what you already feel. And that's where the sociology part comes in, questioning an everyday reality or what you're told is an everyday reality and trying to deconstruct it to see if there's something deeper there. So questioning your own thoughts and what you may be influenced and led by and how you may have gotten to that position. 2, what actions can I take to understand different people's experiences of racism, how they may differ, how they may be similar, and what your part to play is in that. And 3, how regularly do I have conversations with others about inequality in general? Is this kind of a regular conversation that you're having with your colleagues, with your students, with your family, or is this just something that is kind of you see as a professional experience for you, and kind of a requirement to kind of make sure that you're in the know when it comes to content like this? So moving on to that key core term of this session, intersectionality. So it's thinking about how do we take on racist culture in our own lives to create the opposite. And one of those tools is an intersectional lens, which goes back to intersectionality and the concept of it itself. So to go into kind of the origin of the term intersectionality, you may have probably heard about it by now. It's been kind of mainstreamed across the last decade, and you'll probably see it coming up quite a lot. It's also referenced throughout the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan, and intersectionality is a core theme within that Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan. So the term was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989 to try and describe and summarise the experiences of Black women in contrast to white women. And she reminds us not to complicate intersectionality with this quote. So it's basically a lens, a prism for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other. We tend to talk about race inequality as separate from inequality based on gender, class, sexuality, or immigrant status. What's often missing is how some people are subject to all of these, and the experience is not just the sum of its parts. So for those visual learners here, that Venn diagram kind of summarises that. It's how all of these different identity factors interlink to determine the experiences, how the world sees you, how you see the world, and how you kind of go through those experiences and what kind of disadvantage you are likely to be exposed to. So all of those identity factors are really important. And what Crenshaw is saying is that we shouldn't treat them in isolation. We should be considerate of how they may interact together. So I'll just show you a quick video that kind of helps contextualise this and summarise intersectionality a little bit more. Please do let me know if you have any issues with hearing the video. We'll post the link in the chat just in case you have any problems there. But I will just share this with you. So although more of a psychological context, hopefully that's helped to contextualise the subject of intersectionality a bit more for you, and apply that to why it's really important to give that support to students and peers, and have that as a tool under your belt. Something that Dr. Kwame Mackenzie referenced at the end there was the requirement for a whole system overhaul, not just a tweak. And one part of this includes the new curriculum that we've been seeing that's just been introduced, the new Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan that is part of deconstructing those current systemic structures in place that are regressive and perpetuating unequal measures, and trying to provoke a kind of positive and progressive movement in terms of education. So I'm sure you'll all be at that stage as well, where you're looking at this new curriculum and you're seeing how you can integrate those themes when it comes to compulsory Black history, the narratives of people of colour and global majority communities, how you're going to be working that in, and also looking at those underpinning themes and values of the curriculum, which one of them is diversity. So looking at how you can push forward with this Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan with your own institution, and that is part of that whole system transformation. So kind of bringing it back to the purpose and aims of intersectionality, what's the point of it? Really, in kind of a summary, it gives us the bigger picture. It helps us to see the context of the world and give us that bigger picture. So using an intersectional lens helps us to understand the circumstances of a range of people and the adverse experiences they are vulnerable to, for example, intersectional feminism. And that is a really, really key one that you've probably been hearing a lot about recently. That's the origin of intersectionality, the term itself, when it comes to Crenshaw. When it comes to intersectional feminism, identifying the differences between a white woman and a Black woman and in their experiences that they're going to be looking at. So when you're looking at your colleague next to you, who may be making up part of the 3% of Black teachers in Wales, thinking about how your experiences in that profession may differ. You may share that identity as women, but how, as much as you look at your similarities, where are your differences too, and how should you be mindful of that? So if we can do this, we get closer to identifying methods of progress, support and change. And this is really vital to practicing anti-racism as opposed to non-racism. It's about that getting away from that passiveness and into that action. So again, to contextualise with some statistics, there are many factors and experiences related to identity that many individuals can't escape. And our lives extend beyond the school walls, but they can affect our experiences inside them. So a few examples of some health inequalities and how these different identities may be determining our difference in experiences is on the screen here. So one that's highlighted is in the UK, African Caribbean men are up to 3 times more likely to develop prostate cancer than white men of the same age. So again, looking at the differences between men because of race, but also looking at the differences between people of colour because of gender. It really can determine your experiences of the world. Black women are also 4 times more likely than white women to die in pregnancy or childbirth in the UK, and that is believed to be for many different factors, a lot of that coming down to bias and those social factors that kind of draw in when it comes to the medical profession. Also, hopefully you can see this on the screen relatively clearly, but this is kind of a breakdown of different poverty rates, categorised by ethnic groups within Wales. Black African people in Wales are the most likely to experience 3 periods of poverty, so consistent poverty, while the other white groups are the highest likely to have never been poor. So you've really got that contrast there, not just from likelihood of poverty, but likelihood to be in consistent and trapped poverty. Again, our identities extend and interlap beyond race. This can be disability, gender, sex, kind of sexual orientation, all these different things. Again, these are some more statistics of how these inequalities lie within Wales. So 39% of disabled people in Wales are in poverty compared with 22% of non-disabled. The gender pay gap is 14.5% in Wales. More women are economically inactive, 27.5% compared to 19.5% of men. 55% of universal credit claimants in Wales are women. 35% of UK girls wearing school uniforms have been sexually harassed in public. 90% of single parents in Wales are women, and between 2016 and 18, 80% of suicide deaths were men. So you've got lots of different statistics there for lots of different identity measures. And if you're thinking about how one person may actually be falling into multiple of these groups, it may not just be enough to see them as a woman or just to see them as a person of a colour. They're actually all of these things together. So how does this apply to education? Teaching content, for one, you've really got to obviously consider the diversity of your learners and in your classroom to be able to contextualise the class content. So different people with different experiences, different identities are going to be receiving that content and being impacted by that content in different ways. A good example is, say, teaching slavery, when you've got trauma related to that ancestry that may be unvisited or visited, and it goes back to that African diaspora that is really a kind of deep connection to a lot of people. Parental support, understanding the diversity of circumstance in order for you to display empathy as an educator and really understand the situation that a parent might be in, to allow to co-produce a plan for their own child and your student, and for them to really feel like you're taking the time to understand their circumstance and what may be feeding into that. Student support is also a given. It will allow you to enhance that guidance that you can give to children, and also ensuring safeguarding. You can pick up on those different identity measures that may be feeding into why a child may be behaving in a certain way, or displaying certain signs, or interacting with their peers in certain ways. Then you can really give yourself more of a chance to protect them in a safeguarding sense. And also develop a quality IEP, individual education plan, previous individual development plan, in case that child really needs the extra bit of support. If you can understand everything that may be feeding into their life and their identity, you can really start to develop a quality IEP that takes all of those into account. Peer support as well, again, like I mentioned earlier, understanding the pressures of the role, how you may be similar in a lot of different ways to your colleagues, but how you may be different in a lot of ways, in order to really respect and identify those differences. As we know, it's not a simple case of we don't see colour, we have to see colour in order to see those differences and identify the current inequalities that we need to deconstruct. So it'll allow you to provide support, provide understanding for your colleagues, and encourage shared education and learning for you to learn from each other. If you feel understood by one another, by identity, you can really start to open up and free that space for that open and honest conversation. So again, another bit of self-reflection, and please do utilise the chat. Although obviously I'm presenting, I can see you guys. If you want to raise your hand at any point, you have kind of a pressing question, I will 100% try and answer that for you. So just a 2-minute self-reflection, and maybe it is you want to make some notes, pop some thoughts in the chat, or just keep that in your mind. What identities, experiences, or features do you own that intersect to determine the way you experience the social world, access opportunities, or interact with others? So if you think about what may be determining who you are today and what's influenced that identity. So for myself, a white woman who was raised in a single parent household from a certain background, certain area, access to university education. So all of these different things feed in to determine who I am today, how the world sees me, and how I'm going to be seeing the world as well. So again, think about those factors you feel affect you the most, that affect your identity the most, and determine that for you. This could be related to your sex, your gender identity, your upbringing, all these different things. Have a think about that and try and bring it back to yourself. So just taking it back to Lucas now as well. Again, we can see there the impact of racism. It hits people differently, and it can have a long-lasting impact. And for Lucas, this was enhanced by the presence of his additional learning needs. Perhaps his ability to process the instances and the language is different to a person without those kind of extenuating circumstances. So having explored the significance of intersecting identities and the cumulative impact this has on experiences, access, and opportunities, How do you think being both mixed race and having additional learning needs influence the way Lucas experienced racism? And what factors do you think teachers need to consider when developing anti-racism support for children? How is this approached in your school? And do you think this is different for individual children or for children with ALN? So I will pass you over to Soraya now, just to kind of have a bit of an open discussion with a leading question. Hopefully that's kind of set the background for you, given you a bit of information about intersectionality and made that clear for you. But we do like to encourage a bit of open conversation and dialogue. Absolutely no pressure to share, but if you have got any thoughts that you'd like to share, we have got a question that can lead this conversation, but please do just kind of jump in with any thoughts that you have around kind of the general topics of today. But I'll pass you over to Soraya to lead that.
Thank you, Isabella. Yeah, so as Isabella's highlighted, you're not obliged to, but it would be great to have an open dialogue of your thoughts, of the content that you've taken in today and how that applies to your institution and the way in which you practice. So the leading question is, in what instances would using and applying an intersectional lens be most important? So just given the information that we've received, we encourage you to unmute yourselves and turn on your cameras if you'd like to share your thoughts. This is a non-judgmental environment with a core purpose for learning and development. Let's make sure we respect each other's perspectives while challenging our own thinking to expand understanding. Anything we would like any conversation to, you know, this is a confidential safe space, but we would like some anonymous, you know, keep it as anonymous as possible. And just to make you aware, in respect of the case study, that is an alias, you know, it's anonymous. It is relating to a real situation. However, you know, respecting and understanding GDPR and confidentiality, obviously things are anonymous. So is there anyone that has anything to share or would like to ask any questions in particular? Please feel free to put it in the chat or just unmute yourselves and get involved. I take that as perhaps maybe a no, which is not a problem at all. Like I've stated, even if you take this discussion back perhaps to your colleagues, friends, family, even just have that dialogue with yourself, really, just asking yourself those questions, you know. I
think as well, sorry to intersect. What might be useful as well is, and this is more for my curiosity as well, really, is thinking about that question, but on the other end of it. So from your perspective, are there any instances where you would have appreciated someone to use an intersectional lens with you, and where it may have been obvious that that person wasn't kind of using tools like that to understand you, and you've kind of been viewed from a one-dimensional aspect, and where that intersectional lens might have helped in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the easiest of questions, let's be honest, because we're having to think on such a level that there's so many different dimensions to it. So, you know, when you are looking at identity and how you identify, and then how someone identifies you and how the world treats you as a person and what they see, because, you know, not all things are apparent, you know, so there are a lot of differences, and we can see just by visually, you know, perceiving that person. But when it comes down to things like mental health, you know, additional learning needs, disabilities or abilities, there's all these different dimensions that we wouldn't necessarily be susceptible to and understanding. So I suppose it's applying a lens that is looking deeper into that person. Okay, so we have a hand up from South Wales. Let me just see if it came up on the screen.
Yeah, I can give you my name if that's easier. It's Kadra.
Oh, hi, Kadra. Lovely. Thank you.
Hi, I'm not turning my camera on because of the recording, but I'm happy to talk. I think it is easier, Isabella, after you gave the example of your own personal experience looking at it from that lens. And I can think I had many examples pop into my head because I'm Black, Muslim, and a woman. So instantly I had an incident. Well, for me, it's achievement, academic achievement. So a lot of things go in I'm a teacher too, and a lot of things go into working out what level your kids should be at, what you want them to, like what setting you're going to put them in, and that's affected a lot by racism. And I had a teacher, my chemistry A-level teacher, decide that I wasn't ready to do my A-level in chemistry. She said I was failing, and she had a chat with me. I was getting a D, but she had a chat with me, and she said to me, you know, there are other academic routes, and, you know, what we need workers, like we need rubbish men, we need cleaners, we need those kind of jobs too. And like uni might not be the route for you. But she hadn't checked that I was getting an A in English. She hadn't checked what my maths was like. She hadn't checked my other A-level subjects. So it wasn't even an instant of doubt of where it was coming from, because she hadn't checked my other subjects. And it could have just been a matter of dropping that subject or how much help I needed. I obviously passed that grade in the end, but I'm now 29 years old. At 25, I seen her again. I was 17 when that happened. I seen her again at 25 years old, and I hid in Sainsbury's from her because it was quite a horrific experience. That's just one of many experiences I had with her. And she just couldn't get past her own biases about me, my race, my religion, to see me as a person, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's, I think actually, as you say, it's not, unfortunately, that's not a common experience. That's not a rare experience, sorry, throughout the education system. We speak about in a different session a kind of account of a young man who had some undiagnosed Asperger's, but was getting really good grades in maths. But as soon as those grades dropped, it was straight down to the bottom set. Obviously a young Black man, and was quite reserved and isolated in that sense, but felt that he just had no understanding from those teachers, no attempt to kind of ask the reasons why those grades might be dropping, which could be lots of different factors. So I think when we speak about how an intersectional lens can really be a tool, there's the contrast to that as well, where the lack of it really goes to bias, and how that can kind of shape awful adverse experiences for others, and that bias can creep in if you're not using tools like that. Did you have anything you wanted to say, Soraya, about that? Thank you for sharing, by the way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Kadra, and you know, sorry to hear your experience, because like many people of colour, or the global majority, unfortunately have to go through these experiences, which can have an adverse, you know, such a detrimental impact, not only you know, your mental health, but also, you know, your confidence and self-esteem. And I'm glad to hear that you were able to progress and do really well, and now you're a teacher, which is amazing, an achievement. But there are those that unfortunately will take that advice from teachers and let that get in their psyche and be affected, and then go on to do those jobs that, you know, we need them type of jobs, and that would fit you and your ability, when, like you said, that discussion was very limited to the bias of what she thought. It wasn't about, okay, well, why are you struggling? Let's have a little look at your other subjects, what's going on, look at you as a whole, and where you are, as opposed to, well, it's in my head, your grades are failing, and, you know, you should just go on and do something else academically, you know, you're not competent or able.
Yeah, and I definitely think as a teacher now, I'm very conscious of that. You know, there are like 28 to like 35 different reasons why a student could be failing, and like only one, like none of them have to do with race, essentially, you know. And I've never actually experienced myself as a student, a teacher trying to recognize that or look into that, but I have seen that for other people's, you know. So it's interesting. It's a big conversation now that's going on in Wales, and I feel like at the time when I was a student, if teachers were more aware of what we're learning now, it would change their lives.
100%, definitely agree with you. This is a big conversation, and like we've highlighted, intersectionality is so big. There's so many dimensions to it, and how we identify and how the world identifies and perceives us as individuals. So I'm glad that we're able to have this conversation with you guys, and that you've attended this. So at least if you take something away, is just being mindful of yourself, your practice, and how the impact that will have on individuals as well. So yeah, is there anybody else that would like to share or has a question? We have a statement in the chat. It says, thank you for sharing your experience, very helpful to understanding intersectionality. That's from an unknown user, so whoever did that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda. I must be able to see the name.
Oh, right.
But yeah, I think just while, and I can see some typing in the chat, maybe just while we're waiting for some additional kind of questions. Yeah, just to kind of go back to Kadra, what you were saying as well about how there can be 28 to 35 different reasons why a student is kind of dropping in grades or acting a certain way, kind of having a behavioural change in a certain way. And I think as well that brings up an important point in today's modern society. When we look at identity, sometimes those identities are hidden. And so how do we understand what is going on and what makes up a person if we don't see it on the surface? So lots of things about how we identify, gender identify, especially as young people, if you're trying to process that or trying to figure out how you identify, that may be something that's brewing within them. And how do you ask the right questions respectfully, subtly and progressively to be able to understand what might be going on in that head? And as I say, that can be mental health challenges. Maybe something's going on at home. Maybe they've got some doubts. Maybe they're just going through puberty. You know, maybe there's all those different things that can intersect. But Kadra, as you say, it's really important that a teacher understands the kind of volume of their role in a person's life. And you can see that with the visceral reaction of Kadra when she's 25, 8 years later, and that teacher still brings about that response. So you can see the real impact that a teacher is going to make on a child's life, for good reasons or for bad reasons. So it brings up a really important topic. I don't think there's any more questions. I don't know if you can see any more questions, Soraya, unless there's anything else you wanted to bring up in the open discussion. Yeah, go ahead, Kadra.
Sorry, I wanted to just bring up a positive example as well, just to be balanced a bit. I had a Greek teacher who you couldn't tell that he was Greek. And on the first day of lesson, we just thought it was a white man. He was teaching us, fine, he was great, very charismatic. But he looked into our backgrounds, discovered where we was from, asked us some questions. First day of lesson, he was saying, I recognise you're from this country. I recognise you're from West Africa. Is it from Congo? And learned a bits and pieces from there. Like he even asked me what city from Somaliland I'm from, and did some research on it. And I remember we was doing creative writing, and he said, you know, what I've learned about your country is you're very oral traditional learners, that you tell stories and really well. So this is going to come easy to you. We just got to practice the writing aspect, because you can tell stories that can capture a sword. And I hadn't told him a story yet or anything. He was just going on what he knows about my country and my culture. And I went home and I was telling my dad, and my dad was so surprised. He was like, okay, how does he know this? And then it made like a whole family happy. And I carried that with me. I studied English literature and creative writing at university, and like that had such a huge impact as well. He put me in a lot of speech writing contests and writing contests, and was always encouraging me in that aspect. And I feel like cultural competency along with intersectionality as well goes a long way in bridging the gap between pupils and teachers who are from different backgrounds. Even if you come across with like curiosity and an investigative nature, you want to learn about me and where I'm from, I'm happy to talk to you, but I'm happy to explain, you know. I think that's something that would help.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, that teacher sounds amazing. And it would be great to have a teacher like that in all schools. You know, and the fact that it sounds like it installs a lot of confidence in you. So thank you for sharing that positive, because yeah, it's good to keep the balance and see the impact it has, both sides of the argument.
Yeah, and examples of good practice, that's it. You know, sharing those examples for inspiration of how, you know, maybe you can be feeding that back into your own practice as a teacher, and taking that inspiration as kind of just identifying that pupils just aren't pupils, they are their own people as well. They've got their own backgrounds, they've got their own identities, and how do you go about within your profession, within the confines of your school, how do you go about respectfully exploring that to be able to benefit their education? And that's a really great example, and how he's fed that back into kind of the purpose of the lesson, and that's obviously had a lasting impact on both you and your family, so that is brilliant. I think we'll kind of leave it there with the open discussion, and I'll kind of take it to Soraya to close. Thank you, Soraya.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for sharing your experiences once again, Kadra. I know just on the point that you made about cultural competency is important. So just so you're aware, like I said at the beginning, within our you know, IECC, we provide various services, and some of the professional learning that we explore themes on cultural competency. We also look at things like hair discrimination. There's so many different courses, so if anyone is interested, please get in touch so we can continue these conversations moving forward. So yeah, basically it brings us to the last piece of this presentation. So our commitment to act, I feel it's important when we look at these subjects, themes, and how these things impact us as people and other people's lives, that we really take it seriously. It's not just coming here and, you know, taking a little bit of information and ticking the box to say I've done it. It's literally about, you know, actively seeking out opportunities for your own continued professional learning, you know. So if there are any courses or if there are any sessions that are available, and you may not see the relevance, but you know, if you have that thought and be open to learning, you know, you'd be surprised at how you can apply different things within your school. Also, practice what it means to be anti-racist, so action over words. This is where we are now going with this anti-racist action plan. It is literally about being proactive. It's not ticking that box. So we also recommend that you initiate conversation, you know, take your learning outside of the school walls. So speaking with your friends, your family, you know, having open conversations and checking in with yourself, having conversations with yourself as well, you know, always checking in with yourself. How do I feel about this? You know, am I being biased right now? You know, is there more that I could be doing to be proactive? So it is constantly having those thoughts and acting on them as well, appropriately and respectfully. And then obviously utilize the post-session material so that you will have access to this material that we'll be sending out to you. So, you know, refer back to it if you want to, you know, continue the professional learning. Book onto more of our training sessions. We'd definitely welcome you back. So the rest is up to you. We're planting the seeds, and it is for you to just continue this journey in being proactive to working towards being an anti-racist practitioner. So thank you so much. And unless there's any other questions or anything else you'd like to know, our contact details are there on the screen. So contact us, our email address, you know, website, and also our Twitter. So unless there's anything else, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been brilliant. And thank you for all your contributions and for attending. As Soraya says, please do get in contact if you want more information. And we will be sending the slides out bilingually and a bit of post-session material as well to spark some extra reading or research into these concepts. Hopefully we'll see you at session 2. That will be all about privilege in the classroom. And we'll see you soon. Thank you so much for coming and have a brilliant rest of your day.
Thank you.